This is going to be the most educational video you have probably ever seen about what caused low gas prices under the Trump administration, and it's something you have not heard anywhere else. Because the response I got from the minerals guy about the whole, Republicans unleash production and Democrats constrain it, the response I got from him was basically he changed everything to talking about gas prices. So let's talk about it. So the first thing you need to know is right now OPEC is producing what they were producing 20 years ago. Yeah, even though global oil demand has increased by about 20%. But during the end of the Obama administration and the first 2 years of the Trump administration, they were producing more than they ever had. That was keeping oil and gas prices down. But there was something else happening in the United States that was helping that as well. In 2015 and 2016, the United States and the world went through one of the largest oil crashes in history. And that is because OPEC had increased production by several million barrels of oil a day to try to take out the U.S. energy sector. This crash occurred at a time when the U.S. oil and gas sector had the highest amount of debt they had ever had in history. About $400 billion in debt. So by the time they got to 2017 and 2018, 86% of oil companies' operating profits were used just to pay interest on their debt. That's how bad of shape U.S. oil and gas was in. 86% of their profits was used to just pay interest on the debt. The only way oil and gas companies in the United States could cover their debt and their interest was to extract as much oil as possible, as cheaply as possible in the United States. So at that time, in 2016, the United States had over 6,000 wells that were drilled but uncompleted. A lot of these wells had set for a very long time. The quickest and cheapest way to gain production cheaply is by completing wells that were drilled a year or two ago and getting them done. And that is because when oil prices are really low, service companies, the companies that go out and complete these wells and frack these wells, they do that work really, really cheap. So between 2016 and 2017 and early 2017, U.S. oil companies completed about 1,500 wells that had been drilled in years prior but never completed. But they didn't open them up and produce them because we were still in the depths of a huge oil crash. They started producing them as soon as oil prices came up just a little bit so they could squeeze every dollar they could out of those wells. So all of these wells start coming online in 2017, and that's why you see an over 1.2 million barrel a day increase in U.S. production between 2017 and 2018, and also 1.8 million between 2018 and 2019. And that's because oil companies had a certain amount of debt that matured in 2017, and that doubled in 2018, and then that doubled again in 2019. So they started completing these DUCs as fast as they could just to pay their debt. They weren't really making any money. They were just trying to stay afloat and pay their debt. And that is why when you have $50 and $60 oil under a Trump administration, production continued to climb a lot. It was either produce or go out of business. Conversely, if you look at the Biden administration, this is the amount of DUCs they had when Biden came into office. This here is how we have increased production under the Biden administration. Except this time, they're not doing it to service debt. This time, they're doing it to make record profits. And that's where these record profits come from. Because the amount of money you spend in a particular year versus the amount of money you make in a particular year. And when you have this many DUCs, you're spending about half as much to get the production as if you were drilling and completing the well in the same year. So the DUCs is the story. The DUCs and the debt is the story behind the production increases under the Trump administration and the Biden administrations both. DUCs and debt, DUCs and profit. And again, oil prices are high because OPEC is back to producing what they were producing 20 years ago. If OPEC was producing what they were producing under the Trump administration and the last 2 years of the Biden administration, oil would probably be $50 a barrel. And none of what happened here with the DUCs and debt during the Trump administration has anything to do with Donald Trump, just like nothing that happened here under the Biden administration has anything to do with Joe Biden. And the reason why oil prices won't fall if Donald Trump is elected is because there's no debt. There's less ducks and less debt. So there's no external forces that are forcing oil companies to produce more. All of the scenarios that were in place under the first Trump administration no longer exist. And U.S. oil companies aren't simply going to produce more because Donald Trump wants them to. That's not a thing. When oil companies relieve themselves of the huge burdens of debt, they are at their own devices. Nothing can force them to do anything because they have that freedom from that debt. Here, they couldn't do what they wanted. They were forced to do what they had to do to stay alive. And this is another reason right here that I told you in 2024, the increase in production in the United States was going to be more flat than on an upward trajectory. Because the number of DUCs are way down, which means the number of wells they can complete and put online really cheaply is way down. The only way oil prices fall, whether Kamala is elected or Trump is elected or whoever is elected, is if OPEC says so. And that's because OPEC wants to be profitable, and so do U.S. producers. They're not going to spend more money to make less. That is not a thing. Thanks.